Hey, welcome to Bernhardt Reviews. We just saw 1917. So, Harry, what do you think you thought of the movie?
It was like something I had never seen before. You watch this film and you realize that a camera was recording for like 2 hours straight on the same two guys, which is like something I've never seen before.
Yeah, I mean, it really gives you kind of a different perspective on World War I. I saw Peter Jackson's film, They Shall Not Grow Old, and that also shows World War I using real footage, and while that feels very informative and kind of like a documentary, this is a really just dramatized event of World War I, and what I think sets it apart from a lot of other films is the small scale. It doesn't really feel quite epic in the way that Saving Private Ryan or a lot of these movies do. We pretty much focus on those two characters the whole time, I thought.
Well, the thing about those two characters is I never really knew their names when watching the movie. However, despite not knowing their names, when you're following behind these two guys for like 2 hours, it feels so real, like you're actually in the war. And even though I didn't know their names, it was like I had known those guys for a very long time.
Yeah, I actually didn't feel quite as strongly about the characters. I felt like they were a little bit more forgettable, and I think what really sells this movie is the camera work. This film is by Roger Deakins, who did Blade Runner 2049. He's actually my favorite cinematographer ever, and I think he really shines here. The camera work is fantastic the whole way through, and it really helps you feel just immersed in that environment. You really feel like you're in the trenches. Without Roger Deakins, this movie wouldn't have been just the massive hit that it has been.
When you watch this movie, it may remind you of some of those old Call of Duty games.
Yeah, it's incredibly immersive. You're at eye level the whole time, and you feel like, the cameraman is almost a character alongside the main two.
When you watch this film and you watch these two guys go through all kinds of traps like minefields, barracks with a tripwire, barbed wire fences, everything including them jumping off a rock just feels so tangible. And a lot of it can really get your heart racing.
Absolutely, it's an incredibly visual movie, and there are a lot of scenes from this film that are just kind of ingrained into my brain with how memorable they are. Spoilers, maybe a little bit. When he goes over the waterfall, it's incredible. There's a scene where he's running kind of parallel to a trench as all the soldiers are coming out, and it's just insane how many extras they have going. There's another great scene where he comes outside and he sees a cathedral on fire, and it's just smoke and flames everywhere. Really memorable, incredible camera work. But I felt like at a couple of points, the hidden cuts were actually a little bit noticeable.
Well, in a way, you can't blame them for it. Most movies change to a different camera within about 30 seconds, whereas this one had the same camera rolling for more than half an hour.
Maybe this is a little bit of a spoiler, but about halfway through the film, our character is knocked unconscious and it cuts to black. And that kind of frustrated me because in all the media and all the advertising, I had seen them billing this film as at least presented as though it's going to be in a single take. And I felt like a cut to black was a very cheap way to show that kind of knockout effect. I think maybe it would have been more interesting if the character had fallen down, and then we had seen a time lapse of the sun going down and the stars coming out as the character lay on the ground, and then we could cut to them waking up again. Then it would have been completely seamless, no cutting, but I did feel like I was a little bit disappointed when it just went to black in the middle of this movie that is supposedly marketed as a single long take.
That was kind of a cheap way to film the movie, and especially because before that they never really did that before. I was expecting them to keep filming despite that. One scene where they didn't just go black is when the two guys come across this underground barracks. One of the guys notices a tripwire, and although the guys notice the tripwire, there's a whole bunch of rats down in the mine shaft. And sure enough, one of the annoying rats manages to trip the wire and trigger this explosion, which causes much of the mine shaft to collapse on this guy.
I thought that was actually a pretty incredible scene, especially when the actor is getting buried in rubble. That couldn't have been very much fun. It looked like he was actually under dust and coughing. It looked really horrible, very intense for the actors. And the only thing that brought me out of it a little bit was I could tell that those rats were CGI. They weren't real. And again, when everything else in the movie is so gritty and realistic, it took me out of it a little bit. And there were also, it was just some minor prop work. Like, I remember at one point they turned a corner and there was like a Halloween skeleton poking out of one of the trenches. It was a little bit funny. But overall, I think the movie looked pretty good, especially that tunnel scene. So yeah, really intense, impressive, beautiful movie, and really, really unique. So what do you think you would give 1917 out of 10?
Well, I had to think a lot about it because I've never seen a movie like this where they just keep filming for 2 hours straight on the same guys. I didn't quite think it was a masterpiece, but it was pretty close. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10.
Wow, that's pretty good. I'm going to be a little bit lower because while I did feel like the movie was kind of epic in scope and the camera work is outstanding, Deakins always is, I felt like if they didn't have this gimmick glossing up the whole film, it would be kind of a generic, standard war movie. And the characters didn't elevate it, the plot didn't elevate it, but what did was the camera work. That's really what people are coming in to see, and the camera work won't disappoint you. It's really impressive. But I think that while camera work is critical, there's more elements going into a movie than that. You need a good story, and this movie didn't really shake me in the character or story department. So, camera work, 10 out of 10. For the whole film, I think I'm going to give it a 7.5.
Well, that's not too bad.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty impressive movie. Not as good as Peter Jackson's documentary, They Shall Not Grow Old, also about World War I. That's a masterpiece. But I do think this is really good, and I would rather see a bunch of really unique movies like this than a bunch of outstanding films that I've seen before. You know, I love seeing different movies like this one.
So that's an average review of an 8 for Bernhardt Reviews.
Pretty good. 4 out of 5 stars. Thanks for watching our review of 1917.
Please subscribe to my channel and leave a comment below. Thank you. Stay awesome.